It was devastating when I got kicked out of university. Absolutely devastating. I felt so embarrassed. Actually, it led to a serious depression a couple of years later, or a year or so later.
I wanted to start this by asking you if I can introduce you as the man who invented the lab-grown diamond.
Yes, of course you can. Really? Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So you developed the technology for that?
Yep. That's what I was employed to do. Actually, it was really interesting. I had a fairly colourful palette of things that I'd done before I joined De Beers on the industrial diamond division side, DEBID as it was known. It's now called Element 6. A long time ago, 30 odd years ago actually, I'd actually joined the company around the same time as I bought this place, where we're sitting at the moment, our large flat in Wilson Green, northwest London. Anyway, I was headhunted, found, and employed to see if this rumoured technology could be developed whereby we could make man-made diamond in a laboratory that was indistinguishable from natural diamond. Now, that's quite a challenge, because we all know that diamond is formed in volcanoes over very long periods of time at extremely high temperatures, and it's an interesting material because it is a crystal, but it's got a very, very slow growth rate, and as with all crystals, it only grows in certain environments, and the particular physical environment that diamond grows in is usually at very high pressures and very high temperatures. I mean, sort of the way that diamond has traditionally been made is in a thing called a press, where you get the equivalent of 60 cars stacked on top of each other, forcing down on something the size of a baked bean can, which is encapsulated into huge tungsten rings, has an electrical current pass through it in order to melt everything inside through the resistance of this baked bean can, which is filled with carbon materials and some other catalyst metals, as they're called, and diamond powder to stimulate the growth of diamond from what's called a crystal melt. We've all taken bits of a salt crystal, and dipped it into supersaturated salt solution and grown a bigger crystal.
Have we?
Yeah, it's sort of a junior school experiment, or copper sulfate. We've all got that lovely blue copper sulfate material in chemistry lessons, and we let it dry out, and it naturally crystallizes at room temperature into these lovely blue elongated crystals. Well, diamond, is really, really difficult to grow, but this technology was invented in the late 1950s, and then it now is part of an industrial process to grow diamond, and 80% of the world's diamond is in fact man-made diamond made by this high pressure, high temperature technology, and it's used for drawing wire or for cutting difficult things. If you've got an iPhone, then it's been cut with industrial diamond. The screen has been that. In fact, it's been cut by the diamond that I invented. Now, this new technology was rumoured to be far more accessible, much easier, and uses semiconductor growth technology, the sort of stuff that's used to make microchips, which is from gases. It's at low pressure, below atmospheric pressure, and substantially lower temperatures. I mean, the diamond growth temperatures for high temperature growth are of the order of 2,500-3,000 Celsius, and you can have materials at that temperature if you have the pressure all around to maintain the environment, which emulates basically the formation of what's called a kimberlite pipe in a volcano. But the idea that you could grow this at much lower pressures makes it much more accessible to your everyday scientist and your everyday crystal grower. So I was engaged, and at the age of 28, given about £5 million worth of research equipment to purchase or to develop, few people to work with, and a lovely lab out in a secretive place out in Berkshire, in Ascot, and told, go play. What can you do? And, that's exactly what I did. I looked at what was proposed about how you might break certain gases down and make them form diamond in some way or another, and develop the process, which was pretty much like culturing pearls. So we take a seed diamond crystal, a natural diamond crystal, which has a particular orientation, and then provide an environment whereby carbon atoms were stimulated enough to form on the surface of that seed in the regular array that is a diamond crystal. It's called homoepitaxial growth. And now, very earliest stages, this could be done at extremely low rates. So really, when it's taking you a year to grow the equivalent of 1 carat, which is 0.2 of a gram of diamond material, it just isn't economically feasible. But I developed a process where it was actually would take you less than a week, in fact, just a few days, to grow a carat, maybe 2 or 3 millimeters thick, 4 millimeters thick of this diamond material over a substantial area. So we could do it over 20, 30, 40 millimeters diameter in a microwave assisted environment. In other words, we used a microwave oven magnetron, and then the industrial version of that, to excite carbon containing gases, methane and hydrogen, with some argon, just to make the recipe work a little bit better, at a couple of 100 millibar, which is about a quarter of an atmosphere, so a quarter of the atmospheric pressure, in a small enclosed environment, and that would grow at many microns an hour and produce something that was economically viable. Problem was the quality wasn't very good, so we worked on improving the quality till finally, after about 2.5 years of work, I actually produced diamond that was the highest quality possible, the highest colour quality, equivalent to a D in the gem colouring scale for diamond, and very, very low defect density, in other words, no flaws. And it was indistinguishable from the best natural diamond there is. In fact, it was so good that it made it distinguishable from diamond, because diamonds as that quality just don't exist. And we also did some funky experiments where I produced pink ones, white ones, blue ones, the more valuable coloured stones. None of this had ever been done before. And it was kept very secretive, because you can just imagine the world's largest diamond company doesn't want their customers to know that they've actually developed a technology that could effectively eradicate the industry. And that was the whole reason for doing this project, was to see how much it could disrupt the marketplace, whether it really could rock the diamond world. Now, I really enjoyed doing that, but I had a different motive from the outset. I'd always been a keen environmentalist as a child, as a teenager, and it was very, very important. And I love growing stuff, so growing crystals was great, and we were really successful. I grew isotopically pure diamond, the only isotopically pure diamond that's ever been grown in the world. Carbon 12, carbon 13, carbon 14 diamond. To my knowledge, in fact, to pretty much everyone's knowledge, no one else has been able to do that since, because I was given the opportunity to buy isotopically pure gases, extremely expensive, to create something, because I could. And every 6 months or so, a report would be made back to the main board of De Beers, and they'd see what I'd done. They'd go, have some more money. They just want to see how far can you push this technology. And we got it to a stage whereby what we could then do is say, right, we know what can be done. No one else knows this. Now, can we determine and develop some equipment to detect this, and detect it by some particularly fine techniques, mostly optical techniques, where you illuminate with a laser and you look at fluorescence and you find the signatures for this material. Every material has a signature, has signature features. That's what differentiates it. And lab-grown diamond is no different. One of the keys to it is that lab-grown diamond actually can be, so economic that you can produce very, very good quality diamond at about a quarter to a fifth the cost of mining natural diamond. And that's one thing. So the economics is what drove, and the continued existence of the mined diamond industry is what drove De Beers. What drove me was the fact that when I was a kid, I heard an astronaut talking about the fact that they could see the Kimberley diamond mine from space. In fact, it's the only, it was at the time and was for many years, the only man-made structure visible from space. People would see what they called, you can see the Great Wall of China from outer space. You really can't. They're resolving the Yangtze River, which is wide enough to see. You can see rivers, but you can't see the Great Wall of China. Not with the eye and not with a telescope, even from the space station. You can with a powerful telescope, not binocular sights. So I thought, what a blot on the landscape that is. And it wasn't the only diamond mine. There are lots and lots of diamond mines all over the planet. And around the same time, I'd seen a Sunday Times article about open cast mining by children in places like Liberia and Angola, Zaire, and war-torn states, where they would literally be scrabbling around in the mud to find diamonds for warlords who are then using those diamonds to sell to buy weapons. They were called conflict diamonds, blood diamonds. And I just thought that was abhorrent, absolutely abhorrent, seeing these children, the same as me, in such conditions and forced to mine. And equally, a huge amount of damage done to societies all around the world by these conflict stones, and not something we really want to be associated with. It's part of modern day slavery and all sorts of other things. So my aim when I first got this opportunity, and my thinking was, what if we could develop a technology that would curtail and reduce the mined diamond industry to virtually nothing? It's going to take a long time because the diamond industry is a big industry. Huge carriage of diamonds are mined and sold. Mined, manufactured, that means cut into shapes, and sold every year. Millions of carats. And there are diamond mines bigger than the Kimberley, the oldest diamond mine in the world. There are diamond mines in Russia. Kimberley's South Africa. Most of the diamond industry started in South Africa, but there are big industries, huge industry in Australia. We had the Argyle diamond mines, which are now closed down for economic reasons more than anything else. In Canada, Russia, pretty much anywhere where there's been huge volcanic activity a long while ago, and particular sort of geological formations all around the world. Diamond mines shift a huge amount of earth that could be, then over huge areas, that could be used for something far more useful, like regenerative farming. It uses and employs a huge number of people. In South Africa, it employs hundreds of thousands of people directly, and even more indirectly from the other aspects of trade that go with diamond mining. It engages people all around the world in their cutting, polishing, sale, and use. It's a huge diamond industry. I mean, the diamond industry is mostly controlled out of India now, out of Surat in particular, and I can go on and on about this. This is an area that I actually felt born to. This was something that as soon as I got the job, I thought somehow all the planets have aligned for me. It feels right inside. I actually got this giddy feeling inside when I got the job, as you do with all jobs, but this one was, I'm going to be able to do something. I'm going to make this work. This is going to work. I imagined what the outcome would be. I imagined what experiments I would be doing. I became at one with the process I developed. like I was inside it, like I was it. And I could control it from inside, or I could understand it. It's like being mind melding with this microwave plasma that we've developed to grow the material. I still feel like that. Once it's with you, I think you become at one with what your higher purpose is. So I thought, maybe we can actually diminish the mined diamond industry to such a small industry where perhaps it's only there to get the big, unusual, exceptionally valuable, in some people's minds, coloured stones, big stones, the 5, 10, 20 carat stones, which really you don't want to make too many of those. It changes the whole marketplace. And in the end, it's a lot of the whole diamond industry is a marketed, created industry as far as jewellery is concerned, that we don't really need. It isn't really essential. So if we can replace the vast, say 99% of the mining with lab-grown diamonds, we've done a great thing. Okay, we've displaced lots of people, but they could all be reskilled to become regenerative farmers or something else, or using the lab-grown diamonds for other purposes. One of the key features, though, of lab-grown diamonds, and this goes back to the watching kids open-cast mining conflict diamonds, is these things have a provenance. You know they came from a lab. You know that they haven't been created to fuel conflict. You know they're not blood diamonds, so they're conflict-free. And that's a great plus. Conflict diamonds is a big problem around the world. All sorts of people have got involved in this. It is still treacherous and nasty and evil. And so that has to go. So that's one thing. The other thing is the environmental damage that a mine does, the amount of water that it uses, the amount of mercury that is used to extract gold to go into the jewellery side of things, the amount of poisoning of water tables is just enormous. And we live on one planet. We've only got this planet. Okay, nothing can be created or destroyed, only changed in form. But what we're doing is extracting all the time, changing in form, and then not changing anything back again. We're not producing a virtuous cycle. We're not regenerating. We're not maintaining the Earth's systems as we should be. So there's a whole environmental aspect to lab-grown diamonds in the fact that they can be far more environmentally friendly, far more ecologically sound. Okay, use some gases, but hey, CO2 is one of the gases you could use. I'm not saying, but there are companies that use CO2 from the atmosphere as a bit of a marketing gimmick. It is a minuscule carbon capture technology. Not saying that it ever should be that, but it is that sort of thinking. It uses a bit of electricity, but most of that electricity can be generated using renewable sources, specifically to replace the use of fossil fuel electricity. So I maintained and still maintain that lab-grown diamond is important in order to reduce mined diamond, and it might take 50, 60, 70 years to get to a point where mined diamond is actually minuscule just for these specialist coloured stones and large stones that the ultra-wealthy want, that they want in short supply anyway, so you don't want to make those. And the rest of the market can be fulfilled by lab-grown diamonds. And I think that's a great purpose to have. And not everyone needs to do everything, but everyone needs to do something, and that's a bit of my something. Was the whole thing. And I feel really proud, but I still feel very connected to that, and still work all around the world consulting and helping people set up lab-grown diamond facilities. Because I think this is a technology that is actually beneficial overall. I know everyone has a bad view of the diamond market, but it's there. It's not going to go. It's just like, just stop oil. We can't just stop oil. If we do that, we kill people. Because a lot of the products out of oil are used in medicine, in food and drink. It's not just used as fuel. We have to reduce the amount of oil that we use for fuel and gas that we use for fuel, of course, but we can't actually just stop it. It's sort of nonsensical. We need to actually think about how we better use what we do use and reducing the amount that we use all the time. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that rambles on a little bit, but being at one with something is, I think, achieving one's higher purpose, one's total purpose. It's like you get into a state of flow, and it's a constant state of flow, and it's easily switched on again. It's and not so easily switched off. When we find our purpose, I think we find a state of flow that it's hard to ever stop. You can't dam it up. And if you do dam it up, eventually it overflows the dam and just all comes gushing out again.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening to me at this point in my life. But can we go back, because it wasn't a linear path to you ending up in this job at 28. So can we go back to the first question on this podcast, which is, how did you grow up?
Yeah, what was it like growing up?
Actually, I'd love to ask you even further back is about your parents, because I know, so you grew up in the East End and they were both teenagers when they had you. Is that right?
So, it took a while. I found out what my true name was. My surname, my father's surname, was changed by deed poll in the 1950s. And I found out when I made an application to join the Secret Services in the UK, and I filled in their vetting forms, and I got through, I did the civil service exams, got through flying colours and all that sort of blah blah, long while ago, and I was rejected on the basis that I'd given false information on my form. Not a clue. I hadn't said anything. Turned out, actually, that my grandparents' name, and actually my father's name, wasn't Collins, it was Cohen. And it was changed by deed poll in the late 1950s for a variety of reasons, largely because of anti-Semitism in the East End of London, where I was born, where my parents come from, but there's some other reasons as well. So that was the first thing, and that was interesting to know that I was a heritable Jew, because my father was brought up as a sort of Christian. He soon developed to being an atheist in his later teen years, but he was a boy chorister, blue ribbon chorister as they call it. So it was how much further from Judaism can you get than being a blue ribbon chorister in the church. Anyway, and so we grew up in the East End, in a really nasty bit of the East End, actually. 4 generations in one house. So I had my great-grandmother, who was separated from my great-grandfather. They East Enders as well. From
where in the East End were you?
Well, I was in Manor Park at the time. It's still there. It's next to East Ham and Ilford, in between those two, and near Newham, in the borough of Newham. Particularly nasty, very old, rat-infested house with no bathroom, an outside toilet, only cold water, no heating, one fireplace. And 4 generations lived in this one place with 3 bedrooms. So there was my mum, dad and me in a really small box room. It used to be called something like a maid's room, but this wasn't anywhere where you'd consider having a maid. My great-grandmother had a room all to herself, of course. And my great-grand was only in her 50s at the time. I mean, she was very young. And my 3 aunts, an uncle, and my grandparents all lived in the front room. So it was pretty cramped and not so wonderful.
Did everyone have a bed, or was it like mattresses on the floor kind of thing?
So my grandparents had separate beds, okay, small separate beds. I think most people did in those days. It's only if you're wealthy you could have a double bed. King size bed was for a king, and my uncle had a bed to himself, and my aunts were in one bed.
Like a single bed?
Well, it's a biggish single bed, maybe 2 single beds. I actually have to ask my mum that because she says, they all grew up in this place. Anyway, it was damp and nasty, and they could rarely pay the rent.
And so that was your mum had grown up there.
My mum had grown up there.
And how long did you live there?
I was there for 4 years, 4 years, until my parents finally got a council flat. My parents were really young when they had me. I mean, my mum was 17 and 2 days old, and my dad was 19, a student.
How did they meet?
So they met when they were working on sort of Saturday jobs in the co-op in Manor Park. That's as far as I know. My mum's side of the family is very interesting in the fact that my grandfather was distinctly ADHD. I mean, he played every sport under the sun, was really good at it. He would watch TV. We had TV from very early days. One of these little, really small tube TVs, because he was a chronic gambler. So he had to see sport. And sport was some of the first stuff televised. So I actually saw the 1966 World Cup on TV because we had a TV. We had everyone down through. We had nothing else, but he bought a TV, So you could go down the betting shop, and because all those sorts of things were televised. It's really, really weird. But I also saw some TV shows, Fireball XL5 and things like that. Sparky the Piano, all sorts of weird, wonderful stuff. Yeah, but he was distinctly ADHD. He would have the TV on. He'd have an earphone in, listening to the radio, racing on the radio. This is later. He would be doing a crossword. He might have another radio on with the cricket in the other ear, and he could sort of assimilate all this stuff. A brilliant mathematician. He was a sheet metal estimator, so a cost estimator, when they used to have those for building plants, and he would estimate the amount of metal needed. He was a qualified welder and all sorts of things. Very knowledgeable, interesting bloke. I wish I'd actually known him closer for much longer than I actually did, because we sort of moved away. But mum's side of the family came from Irish stock that was fueled by Romanis. So I'm part Romany and part Jew. So it's an interesting heritage, all in all. It's a sort of a rich background, that side of things. So growing, that's very earliest memory. My earliest memories are playing in the garden with my uncle and aunt. One of my uncle is only 5 years older than me, and one of my aunts only a year and a half older than me. So we used to play together, and that was playing in the back garden of Herbert Road in the East End.
Oh, that's why, because when you're saying aunties, I'm imagining like grown women having, but they were children.
My aunts, like my mum, they're in their. Well, my mum's not even in her 80s yet. She's in her 70s, early 70s. My aunts are in there. They're a bit older. One of them, as I say, is only a year and a half older than me. The oldest is, 22 years older than me. So not like a sort of great aunt, dowager aunt sort of thing. And
did you have siblings?
Yeah, I've got a brother 6 years younger than me. And
where did you then move? Where was the council flat?
Well, the council flat was in Woolwich, overlooking the Tate and Lyle sugar factory, which is still there and still operating, and looking towards Woolwich Ferry. So my dad, when he was driving home, he got a car early on, and he's training to be a teacher, and became a teacher. And he used to go onto the Woolwich Ferry at a particular time all very regular scheduled timings in those days. And he would obviously leave work, get on there, and he would flash his headlights in a particular sequence, like Morse code, and I would look down from the sort of whatever floor we were on, I don't know, 7th floor, 31st floor, whatever it was, to see him flashing his headlights, to be able to tell my mum, Dad's on his way home. So there's some of my earliest memories of that. But yeah, before that was growing up, playing in the back garden, playing football or whatever, hangman with real nooses, that sort of thing.
What do you mean hangman with real nooses?
Oh, well, my uncle tried to hang me at one point. Yeah, we were playing Cowboys and Indians, and it was a lynch-in. And so he's credited with saving my life, but actually, because he held me up after we'd done this daft thing. Yeah, that was fun. You could do all sorts of things. We were left. What it was like growing up for me, and it goes on, was a life full of imagination and play. So from the flat in Woolwich, we moved to Buckhurst Hill in Essex. My dad got to teach at a private school there. I didn't go to the private school, but I went to a small school, and I actually went a bit late because my parents got the dates wrong for when you were supposed to go to school. They were really young.
So
I mean, you imagine. I was about half a year older than I should have been.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah,
it's not like you were like 10 turning up.
No. Things went a little bit awry later on, and I was moved up a year because they thought I should be up a year, but that wasn't particularly useful in junior school. Anyway, so yeah, we moved to Buckhurst Hill, and there's loads of stories therein about that.
How come you don't have a strong accent? East End.
Because
Essex.
Worked very hard on not having one. My parents desperately wanted to get out of the East End. They really didn't see any future there. Well, you imagine being a parent at 17 or 19. You have no idea about what to do. You've been brought up in a hovel-like background by parents who didn't have any idea about parenting. I mean, parenting has got so much better as time has gone on. So much better. But they didn't know what to do, so they let me just play. My dad, but was an educationist, said play is the best thing for them. Just let them play, let them do anything. So I'd go in. He had a sort of workshop in the back garden, which was really just a shed with an old sideboard in, because people used to have to make stuff and repair stuff. So that's all he did. People used to cycle around if you couldn't afford a car, just like nowadays. I mean, things haven't changed. It's just that the volume has changed so much. There's so many more people doing it now. People would sew, people would repair stuff. I was allowed to go into his workshop, and particularly proudly, I took 6-inch nails and a hammer when I was about 3, 4, and nailed his sideboard so he couldn't open it ever again.
Why?
Well, because I could. I didn't think that's what I was doing. I was just nailing these long nails into the top of this workstation. No one said I couldn't, but it just happened to enclose all the drawers underneath. I know it took him ages and ages to open it. I mean, he couldn't open them properly. He had to break them. Anyway, just left to your own devices. We were totally left to our own devices. We used to go scavenging around the bomb site bits of the area that we lived in, because that part of London was very heavily bombed. There's a lot of light industry there, and there used to be a sweet factory at the end of the road that I was on, toffee factory. That was really interesting. But it was a particularly free environment. I mean, looking back on it now, it must have been awful. It took my mum years to accept that she grew up in poverty.
What were the demographics like?
Very multicultural. So my grandfather was a trumpeter as well, and he used to play in big bands, small bands, jazz bands, but he also used to play at Jewish weddings, bar mitzvahs. So he'd come back with his trumpet case full of Jewish food, because it was laden with food, playing Jewish wedding tunes and goodness knows what else. So that was always good fun. So yeah, it was very multicultural, very, very Jewish.
Was he the Cohen who changed his name?
Yeah. My dad's family changed their name. My great-grandfather was a scientific instrument maker out in the East End, and that was a great thing for immigrants to do. So there were a lot of Romanis around our place, well, former Romanis. Well, I say a lot, there was a couple up the street.
And which countries did the immigrants come from?
Oh, all over, as far as I know. I'll have to ask my mum, actually. But Germany, Poland, Italy, quite a lot of Italians. They're clumps of people. A lot of original East Enders, people who probably came down from hundreds of years ago, the Huguenots.
And what brought them to the East End?
It was a low-cost place to live.
So they came to London for opportunities and ended up in the East End.
Yeah. Definitely. And we talk about going up west, the West End was always the home of so much more industry that wasn't light industry or heavy industry, but it was like printing, Fleet Street, newspapers, publishing, minting coins. It's out towards the East End. You had the tanneries and all those other sorts of light engineering, and so the city West End became more about services, and the city in those days in particular. So anyway, we moved out to a slightly posher place where my dad was teaching. Then we moved again out further out into Essex, somewhere else for my junior schools. I went to 2 or 3 junior schools. That's what it was like growing up. Was it felt like to me we'd just get settled in a place, I'd just make friends, then we'd move. And communications in those days were very different. It wasn't as if we had a phone until much later, and not everyone had a telephone, so you couldn't exactly telephone someone. When you moved away from an area, you pretty much, unless you were pen pals and wrote letters, you lost contact with people. Now, of course, you can move halfway around the world and be in daily contact. Never lose those real-time friendships. So, progressing on, then my parents then moved up to Leicester when my dad became a teacher trainer, and that was brilliant, because I went to a really good school, just a state school, but it was a really good state school. Gave me lots of opportunities. Like I say, we were free to do all sorts of stuff. It was really good fun.
And did you have a sense of what your parents wanted for you, or they were happy for you to just figure it out?
They were happy for me to figure it out. They just wanted me to be happy, but they wanted me to have a good education so that they could do better than them. That was always the thing. I think that's what all parents want. But they had a particular drive that they never wanted to go back. They worked very hard to get out of the East End, to move from poverty and working class through to distinctly middle class. They definitely wanted to shift up that. No further higher than that. They recognised they weren't ever going to do that. Some of the family did, actually, but they did that through wealth. The East End boy made good, sort of barrow boy trader, doing well. That was one of my uncles. Uncle by marriage did particularly well, became a multi-millionaire. He's one of those stories that you hear about, coming from a poverty-stricken background and suddenly falling to do something that you're naturally good at. He was naturally good at trading sugar, so he made a lot of money out of it. Anyway, so getting to Leicester was fantastic. And I'd always had lots of hobbies, but it was there where hobbies really could take off. I was given part of the garage to have my own workshop, make my own chemistry lab. I did an audit of my hobbies from the age of sort of 8 or 9 up to 19. I had 31 distinct hobbies, all of which I did in depth. So I was always interested in electronics. I was given an old valve radiogram as it was called, to play my music on. And it was valve generated, and I used to play with that, fiddle with that, change the valves and see what I could do, work out everything about with it. But I developed the electronics, and I built my own oscilloscope so I could make a signal generator to create a signal at 2600 hertz, 2600.00 hertz it should be, to do what's called phreaking. I persuaded my parents to buy a tone phone. And in yesteryear, many, many years ago, you used to be able to make calls by putting a particular frequency down the tone phone. So
what's a tone phone?
You know what a fax sounds like?
Mm.
Okay, so that uses a series of tones to call a number or to transmit information. So you hear that squeak and squawking. Well, the tone phone had 10 buttons, 0 to 9, and each button had a different tone. Do 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 do. Right, that might be. That's how it sent its number. That's how it sent the information. Was by a tone, a frequency, as opposed to a dot or a dash or 9 dots. You've seen the wheel-based phones where you turn it around, it's very slow, but you go 999. Stupid. It should have been 000, or 111.
It is in Australia.
Yeah, well, that was obvious. In the UK, it was 999, so you go 9.
The emergency number for any Americans who probably have no idea.
Yeah, that's it. So it was, but they were just clicks. So it was 9 clicks. So the information was sent by a series of clicks. So it would be 9 clicks, then 8 clicks with a bit in between. Tone phones worked by sending a tone. They could be much quicker. But they had a fault in that if you put a particular tone down the phone, it would open up all the solenoids and you could make free calls. Or you could call it all over the place. And it was really smart. And it's called phreaking with a PH. And you'll still find old people like me talk about phreaking. And I had a ham radio, CB radio was another one.
So who would you call with your free calls?
Anyone I could. Anyone. Just dial a number.
Really? And speak to random people on the other end?
Well, there weren't telephone directories internationally. You had
you were making international calls?
Yeah, absolutely. And when dial-up came, for dial-up computing, accessing the early days of the internet, we used to do exactly the same. Use the internet entirely free rather than paying a huge amount per minute to see if you could link up to any of the predominantly American-based systems.
And so you were just led by curiosity and play.
Yeah.
And there was no idea of loss aversion, or you were just free to experiment and it doesn't matter if something went wrong.
Oh, my parents caught me making seriously dangerous chemicals. I used to really enjoy, who doesn't enjoy a good fire? But I used to make my own fireworks,
How did you figure this stuff out?
Well, there were books around, that's one thing, and people were
books how to make a bomb at home.
But everyone knew about weed killer and sugar bombs, potassium nitrate. And you add sugar to it, and you could make these. Fireworks. People used to make fireworks. You could have a chemistry lab in your home. You could do all sorts of things. And everything was so much more accessible.
Were your friends into this as well?
A couple of them. there was a guy over the road who was who worked for the GPO, the General Post Office, and he was a seriously good what's called radio ham, and he had all sorts of aerials in his back garden. He built his own amplifiers and transmitters and receivers. He was a really interesting guy, and his wife was actually. They'd both been in the army, but they were really interesting people to talk to. And of course, if you want to know anything about anything, you don't go to the expert at university. You go to the local society and find the person. Old Joe knows all about the geology of the northeast of England coastline, who will be able to tell you everything about it, more than any book can. Interested hobbyists are often far more knowledgeable and useful than purported experts who have focused down onto one thing. The interested hobbyist knows an awful lot. So I'd find those. I joined the Astronomy Society. That was really good fun. All these people. And I met Heather Cooper, who was one of the founding women in astronomy societies for the UK. All sorts of stuff. Stone polishing.
Actually, do you know by heart what it says on the back of your loo door?
Which bit? The Palczynski principles.
Yes.
The 3 Palczynski principles. I think I actually have them innate. Basically, don't go as far as to do something that you can't recover from.
Good tip for investing as well.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much it. Palczynski was a really interesting guy. He was turn of the 20th century, 19th, 20th century engineer in Russia who advised about building all sorts of things across Russia. And actually, he said you shouldn't build these particular dams that were all around and riverways for a variety of reasons, but he was ordered to do so. And when they failed, he was shot. And his Palczynski principles, I think, are ways that we should all consider working.
So the first one is something about exploring and playing and following your curiosity.
Basically, be curious. Only do things that you can recover from, or you think
don't
you
risk
can.
your livelihood.
Don't put everything into one
home.
basket. Which is pretty much commonplace. What's the other one? Can't remember the other one.
Oh, learning from the failures.
Getting
feedback, learning, moving forward.
Feedback's important.
Yeah,
but that actually mixes in. There might be 3 principles, but they are one principle, and it's basically, I think, how scientists work. How scientists should work, especially if they've got any kind of ethical perspective to what they're doing. And so I had all these hobbies, and they were all weird and wonderful. But then... I love collecting snail shells. I've got a Victorian snail shell collection. That was really good fun. Polishing stones, minerals, mineral identification. Oh, swimming. That became a weird one. The idea... Could you teach yourself to swim by reading about it? There's always been this thing.
Sounds dangerous. Sounds dangerous.
It is. But I thought, could I teach myself how to dive, swimming, diving, by just reading about it, by reading what other people have done? There used to be all these guides you could get, the Penguin Guide to Diving. And it'd be how to do all these dives written down and little drawings. I thought it's really interesting, but could I do that? So I tested it out. I fell in love with the idea of gliding. So I went gliding once. So petrified. It was so exciting, so petrifying, so expensive that I didn't do it again. But that was always a passion, the idea of flying and saving up to do stuff.
So did you start working, and were you buying all these guides and whatever on your own?
As soon as I could, I got a Saturday job. I didn't want a paper round or anything like that, but I got a Saturday job as a warehouseman up at the age of 16, up at this superstore called Woolco, which was a massive version of Woolworths, really, with selling all sorts of other stuff. And I would earn about £6-8 every Saturday. It doesn't sound much, but it was quite an amount. I got pocket money from home. I would take every Thursday morning off because I could in sixth form, and I would clean through the house because my mum said I could do the cleaning as well, at least as well as she could. I would do other things around the home, and it sounds trivial, but setting the breakfast table and the dinner table, because we all used to eat together for breakfast and dinner in the evening, 5 days a week, and every meal at the weekends, except for Sunday breakfast.
Why not?
I used to cook. As my parents spent time in bed. They were young. Sunday morning, we were downstairs watching TV, which in Leicester was a programme called Nai Zindagi Nai Jiran, which was New Way, New Life. And it was how to introduce immigrants into UK culture. So it was about language and all sorts of other things. That was really interesting in a multicultural place like Leicester that was... I think it's 45% immigrant.
From where?
Mostly from Pakistan, India, and there's quite a lot from Jamaica as well, and Poles, one of the largest Polish communities in the country. But they are real. At the time they were immigrants. They'd come from Uganda. Now, of course, they're British people. They're entirely a UK community, which is fantastic. I actually really enjoy that aspect of culture.
So then, despite all of these hobbies, you went and studied psychology to begin with. And then...
Not psychology. That was... So, my dad was an educationist, teacher trainer. And as a result... He worked out at this place called Scraptoft out in Leicester, which is where I got my first computing experience. Age 11, I learned to program in Fortran 4, COBOL, later Pascal, on a PDP-10 machine, which was a big mainframe machine with punch cards and tape. Not punch tape, not magnetic tape. Magnetic tape came a little bit later to me. So that was great. I used to go every other Saturday morning or every Saturday morning for a long time. And while he was doing his work, preparing for the following week's lectures, I could play on this computer. So I taught myself like that. At school, I was good at most things, not exceptional at anything. Mostly because I spent all my time doing what I wanted to do. As opposed to what I was supposed to do. I'd do the minimum amount of work, get my homework done straight away in the evening so I could go off and do hobbies or play five-side football or whatever. I was on with that. What I really wanted to do, I was taken by history and English. Loved poetry, loved plays. Set up a poetry reading group, play reading group. We did theatre studies at school. It was in plays, that sort of thing. That was really good fun. I wanted to be an architect. So when I was... mid-17, really big into punk music and everything that went with that, sociology, socioeconomics. I did a couple of weeks work experience at an architect's practice where the really old people there, who were probably about 25 or 26, said, "John, you don't want to do this. You'll end up designing council blocks or toilets for schools or something like that, and you spend 7 years at university and track practicing, and you still get nowhere, and you end up somewhere like this." Somewhere like this actually was probably a really good place to start, and 25, 26-year-old architect was doing really well. Anyway, brought up by educationists, my father's friends that they go to dinner with, and we'd meet. Some of them were, they're all really interesting people. Jeff Bishop taught me contemporary dance. I really like contemporary dance. I was taken to see which one? Ballet Rumba at the Haymarket Theatre in Leicester, and I was just blown away by that. So I went. One of my hobbies became contemporary dance and learning that until Jeff sadly died. The other thing, I got really interested in psychology, partly because my dad is an educational psychologist and we used to talk about this sort of stuff all the time, but especially about educational development. But some of his friends who would give lectures as well at the teacher training college, but were at the university, with people like this guy called Jim Reason, Professor Reason, and he was a psychologist. And later on, I used to babysit or childmind for him in exchange to being able to read some of his books. And he had first edition of Freud, and I'd be able to look at these things, think, oh, wow.
Did he pay you as well, or only got?
No.
Wow.
No. No, I didn't really think about that. I got paid by other people to babysit, but that was special. The big thing was that his wife, Ria, really beautiful Scandinavian woman, was a sex therapist. And so they would be talking in front of us, a teenage boy at dinner, Ria talking sex therapy to my parents as entertaining after dinner speech. What bigger thing? I wanted to go into psychology. If that's what it was, I'd love to do that.
What did that involve back then? Sex therapy?
Oh, I don't know. I just remember some of the stories, and how excited I was as a 17-year-old boy.
Of her clients?
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Surely
Strangely, wonderfully. It's totally
some
unethical.
Kind of breach of,
of course it was.
confidentiality.
Those days were very different, though. You have to remember that in the late 70s, early 80s, the world was very, very different. Things were openly racist on the TV.
Like what?
Openly sexist. Well, we had My Neighbour Next Door, for example, talked about, Chalky was the nickname for the person of colour. And they used to use the N-word and all sorts of things. I mean, it was a very, very different environment. And it was sort of tacitly accepted. We didn't like it. And it was very, actually, it was very multicultural, and it was very, very easy to relate to, but it was also very separate, if you know what I mean. It's a very different world. Anyway, definitely it would be a considerable breach now, but in those days, I mean, no names were used. You used to be able to read about all sorts of things.
Like what?
Masters and Johnson, for example, and the studies of sex therapy. They were things that they would talk about, which talked about all sorts of stuff, and the Kinsey report, and all these other things from the 1950s and 1960s of sex therapies and sex investigations and everything that went around that. I mean, there was even a TV program about, I think, Marston and Johnson a few years ago.
So you decided to go to university and study psychology?
Well, I thought about it, but my dad said, there's not really anything in it. He wanted me to be a medic, because he always wanted to be a medic, but he never really got the opportunity to take his studies any further. I mean, being a dad at 19, he didn't get a very good degree. He did a physics and maths degree. He did a physics degree, actually. He didn't get a very good degree at all. And I think genetically predisposed to what one's parents are good at. I was really good at physics and maths. So I did physics, maths, and took an elective of psychology. So I did 2 years of psychology. Mostly because there were no girls on geophysics or astrophysics, but there were lots on the psychology course. You can't say that today, but, you could in those days.
I mean, if that's what you were motivated by, that's just the...
I was motivated by the fact that I was good at physics.
Yeah.
I was really good at maths. In between going to university and leaving Leicester, my parents moved down to Devon. My dad became a education inspector for maths and computing for Devon and Cornwall. So we moved to this place in the back of beyond in Lidford, really beautiful. They couldn't decide what house to buy. There's several that they wanted to. So I picked the one that I thought I would most enjoy being at. Then went away to university. But I had nearly 5 months gap before I left, when I'd left school after doing my A-levels, before going to university. And we'd moved to this place on the edge of Dartmoor, really beautiful. My mum saw an advert for Barman Wanted in this beautiful Germanic script, written on a postcard placed in the window of the local minuscule post office and general store in this quaint little village. So I went for the interview and got the job. So I became a barman almost overnight. It was brilliant. And I'd always been cooking family food and everything else, liked drinking. It sort of naturally fell into bar work, but was asked to help out in the kitchen whenever I could, KPing, whatever, cleaning up, really enjoyed it. And one day, the chef just we had a new chef because the old chef retired, Joan retired. New chef came in and she couldn't cope with it. It was a really, really busy, exceptionally well-known country, 16th century coaching inn called Dartmoor Inn. Anyway, Wendy, the people who took this place over, and the reason why they were advertising for new bar staff was this guy called Walter Fader, who was a Hungarian who had moved to South Wales just pre-war, obviously with some money. Wendy would say their butler tried to kill them, and it was really funny. They escaped with their furniture, only their furniture, and you sort of think this is really funny. But anyway, he set up a sheet metal works with his brother in South Wales, made a lot of money, got cancer of the stomach, recovered from that, thought he'd have an easy life, buy a 16th century coaching inn in Devon. That'd be an easy life. I'll be a pub landlord. It was really exceptionally busy. It was an exceptional place, fantastic food. Anyway, the new chef just disappeared halfway through service. And Wendy came in a flat, Walter's wife, and said, John, you can cook, please. And so I went into the kitchen, and it was just, I naturally fell into it. I absolutely loved it. And we'd do huge numbers of covers. And I took over the restaurant as well. They were running a restaurant, so I had to do that. That had 30 covers a night, and I had someone two people working with me from the local St Mark and St John's catering college. And what I said to Walter and Wendy was, look, I'm supposed to be a barman, and I'll do that whenever you want, until you get a new chef, which they didn't get until I left. I was good value, but I want to go on day release and be properly trained. So I went to Marjon's, 1 day a week release, and did the Cordon Bleu course, which I didn't finish because I was only there for 4 months, which was a real pity. I should have gone back to doing that. Anyway, great fun, earned a fair bit of money that I could take to university to continue some of my hobbies. So I fell in love with opera and as well at the time. I always liked classical music, but I could go to opera then, It was really good fun. I could afford to do that.
Where did you go to the opera? In London?
Opera House in London, yeah. And it was always a dream to go to Glyndebourne and then 20 years later go to Glyndebourne, see the opera at Glyndebourne in Sussex. Okay.
And then...
And so I did my degree, and the reason why I'm saying I trained as a chef to put myself through university, because we didn't have much money. And I wanted money. Because my pocket money I'd always spent on buying albums, going out for meals with people, going to gigs, buying books. As you can see, around this place, I've got a whole room full of books next door. There's there are thousands here, maybe 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 all in all, that I've been collecting ever since. Anyway, while I was at university, in my second year, I became bar manager for the hall's residents, and did a really good job. Actually, at the end of the year, we had made so much profit that the HM Revenue and Customs came and did an inspection and questioned how come we'd made this profit but never declared it in previous years. And it took quite a lot to describe and explain to them how in previous years the bar had virtually made a loss, and on some occasions made a loss that they had to carry over. How had I done this? Well, I just tightened up operations. I stopped people from giving away free pints. We did many more events, so there'd be a weekly cocktail event or something else. Made huge amounts of money. But as a result of doing that, I failed my second year. Passed psychology, yeah, great, but I didn't even sit some of the physics exams. Certainly didn't go to most of the lectures. So, turning point in my life, a point of adversity. What should I do? Because I was good at catering. I could have been a chef, and I wanted to do that.
Did you know that was going to happen, that you were going to fail, and you were like, or you just kind of mismanaged your time?
It was mismanaged my time, spent far too much time with other people and with my girlfriend and with hangovers. Far too much time funking out about other stuff, like going to the law library, really good law library, and going through space law. I thought it was just wacko, this space law. There's 20 volumes, great big thick volumes of space law. Unbelievable. Anyway, so yeah, it was just, I was in another world. I thought I was invincible, but obviously wasn't. It was a serious drop to earth. So I decided I really wanted to finish this.
Why did you not turn up to your exams?
In bed with my girlfriend, I was hungover, didn't remember that was an exam, that sort of thing. Hardly went to any lectures. I probably, in fact, I sort of remember, it's really embarrassing to say it, I probably didn't go to 2 of the exams because I hadn't been to a single lecture for those courses. Mm-hmm. I'd done a lot of work around them, but I hadn't been to a single lecture, didn't have a clue. It was remiss of the university not to have really picked up on it, but then again, like I said, communication was very different in those days. If you didn't go into the department, how are they going to contact you? Anyway, so I decided I really wanted to finish this. I like finishing stuff. I don't like starting stuff that I don't finish. It seems a total waste. Strings left at the end of the universe. So I went to the bank, and with the fact that I had earned money, I had a job, I had pay slips, I got a loan. I got it guaranteed by my dad, who didn't have to pay anything, and paid for myself to resit the year at another institution, local institution, where I really fitted in. Everything all of a sudden clicked. That my purpose then became finish this, do really well at it. I did really well at it. I had offers to do PhDs all around the country, so I went on a little road trip to different places to look at imaging, the physics of imaging, maths of imaging, Imperial. There was superconducting quantum fluids at Cardiff. There was a weird and wonderful thing in Southampton about rheological materials for self-setting fuel. I wanted to do good civil and industrial research. I plumped for one that was it's called a case award, so it's funded by industry, and you had to work in industry at the same time as doing your PhD, with the Central Electricity Generating Board developing a dosimeter, which is a measure of the dose of radiation that you get in real time for certain radiations in nuclear power stations that meant they had a huge loss of work time, because people used to wear these film badges. You still see them in radiographers still wear a little blue badge or a red badge with a piece of film in that is developed after every day or every week to show how much fogging there was, which was very accurate determination of how much radiation the body has absorbed. But of course, that's knocking the stable door after the horse is bolted. It was quite possible for people to work too long in some environments where they had more radiation dose than they were supposed to have in a year, which is potentially health hazard, but also you've got to employ this person for a year and they can't do anything. They can't work anymore in the role they're in. So it was a really useful piece of civil research. I really enjoyed it. Gave me 3 months a year for 3 years working in a nuclear power station down in Gloucester, Berkeley in Gloucestershire, training nuclear lab. It was really good fun.
When were the first nuclear power stations built here in this country?
1960s, 1970s. They were started late on. Intriguingly, it was probably more extensive than one might have imagined nowadays that it could be, because there was a great anti-nuclear campaign, and there's the huge campaign for nuclear disarmament that went on for many, many years, and somehow nuclear power has always been linked with nuclear weapons, madly. But that's when I was doing my PhD.
So you did the PhD in nuclear physics.
Nuclear physics and semiconductor theory. It's up there.
How?
You see that black thing that's about 3 inches thick, 2.2 pounds, just over a kilo and a half, actually. Makes a great doorstop.
How did you manage to focus on one thing for 3 years? Because you have so many different interests.
I didn't. I had opportunity for computing, so that was great. I could do whatever I want. And hacking, my first hacker name was Tron. It was great, and it was actually Tron_IC.
But how did you get that done? Because I can see
immense amount of focus. Although I went out every night to see bands and go drinking with my mates. I spent lots of time computing and reading and wandering around, especially the canals, looking at architecture, which I still hankered for, still do, actually. It's amazing, actually, when you feel a sense of purpose around stuff, how much you can get done in how little time. I started getting the best results and the most applicable results the day my grant ran out. I was paid quite well on the case. Well, I paid what was a really good salary, so I had a lot of money. So I used to come down to London, see my girlfriend every other week, spend the weekend in London. She'd come up and we'd spend the weekend together in Birmingham. Used to go to the opera, so all sorts of stuff. It's just that.
What was the purpose with that you felt strongly about?
Finishing, but also producing something that was valuable to the project, that would actually work.
Protecting people from radiation.
There was that, from excess radiation, saving the CEGB money, helping the nuclear power industry have better legs, help it to keep going. And also the self-fulfillment of doing a doctorate. You are your own boss. It's totally up to you. I had a supervisor who, at the end of the first year, I fell out with, so I didn't used to see him very often. I'm sure he would have kept me on the straight and narrow. I mean, it would have been a lot more boring. Because of something I did stupid, I had to use a lot of the facilities outside of the university. I hacked the system, and someone had said to me, "Oh, John, I don't know how you can do all this computing lark. It's all double Dutch to me." So I turned all the terminals into Dutch language, and no one could use the system for nearly 3 days. And what I didn't know at the time, I also did something stupid in the fact that we used to be allocated computer time, and I used to use all mine really quickly. So I used to borrow other people's. I'd exchange stuff. I'd help people write their theses, the Chinese students, in exchange for their computer time. And my neighbour, Chu Tang, had loads of computing time that he didn't use. And so I used his login and password, and I used that when I changed the system. Anyway, they went to him and said, "Why have you done this?" These two guys came from the university, probably Secret Service or something, I don't know. Anyway, they came and he said, "Oh, it wasn't me, it was John next door." And they said, "Did you do this?" I said, yeah, it's funny, isn't it? And they said, "No, come with us." And turned out that the university that I was at, the computing department was part of the backbone for a thing called JANET, which is the Joint Academic Network, which was the entire computing network for the whole of the UK. And I had managed to stop it from operating for about half a day, actually, for JANET itself, until they solved the problem.
By accident?
By doing something stupid. So I actually had to sign a form that said I wouldn't use a computer ever again at the university. So I had to go elsewhere.
How did that make you feel?
Gutted. Absolutely gutted. Very embarrassed. I'm very embarrassed. Mostly that I'd been so naive as to get caught. But also the sort of loss of communications with people all over the place. People I'd never met. It's like having Zoom calls. You've never met someone in real life, but you've had a Zoom call with them. Well, in those days, hacking, it was like... you never met them in real life. You don't know what they look like. You don't even know anything about them other than your sort of backwards and forwards communication. So I'd lost all of that. So I also thought a large part of what I was doing was based on the computer for my PhD. And I thought, I want to finish this. I don't want to just leave it out because I didn't know what else. I felt entirely rudderless. I had so many things I could do, but I knew if I wanted to do all of them or any of them again, I had to finish PhD. So I just made relationships with people all around the country at different institutions and used their facilities, wrote the PhD on my own, didn't get any results until the day that my salary grant ran out, and then spent 3 months solidly in the laboratory to do experimental work until I got it to work. And I actually slept in the lab because I also lost my accommodation. So I slept in a large cupboard in the lab.
For how long?
3 months. I would go down to my girlfriend's whenever I could at the weekends and some of the other days when I wasn't in the lab. The security people. It was in a huge building, really, really big building, very easy to hide in. And the security guys knew I was there, and they used to come and check up and see if I was all right.
You sleep on the floor?
In the cupboard.
Did you have a mattress?
No. Just a nice sleeping bag.
Wow.
I used to use the university showers, everything. It was quite feasible to do. You couldn't,
and you
just couldn't do it nowadays.
You were just determined to finish.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then how did you get from finishing the PhD to that job at De Beers?
Well, there's another job in between. So I took 3 months to write my thesis. I wrote it totally on my own. The next time my supervisor saw me after about a year and a half in was when I presented my fully bound thesis to go then later on for my viva. They had to get more people in because the way I'd written my thesis was about twice as long as it should be, and it's written in 2 halves. And they said, "Well, John, you've got a nuclear physics part to this and a semiconductor theory part to this. And so, which bit do you want to be examined on? Because we're going to ask you about both. But when we put down, is it a nuclear physics degree or is it semiconductor theory?" So I said, because in theory I could have had 2 PhDs. I could have actually submitted both of them, one for one thing, one for the other, but it's the overlap between the two that made it work. Anyway, I very quickly got a job at King's College in London, developing a gas flow sensor for the smart meter. So the smart meter that you have in your home now for measuring gas has a device in it. That's the electricity one, down there. Has a device in it that measures the gas flow. I invented a device to measure that gas flow. It was part of a competition for British Gas at the time, and there were 5 winners who produced 5 vastly different devices. Mine was one of them. It was a very simple device, and actually British Gas, in their wisdom, decided it was far too simple. It might work, but it's far too simple. We can't cope with something that's so simple that we're going to have to roll out big time. And so they chose they actually chose one from Professor Sir Neville Mott's lab, and I've worked with him on my PhD, on part of my PhD, which was really interesting in his lab. Anyway, his device didn't work, but they chose that, and it took years for them to get a device that did work to replace the diaphragm version of grey box that we used to have, or many people still do have actually, the gas flow measurement. Anyway, I spent 2 years doing that until I met someone at a conference who ran the De Beers group that was going to start looking into that. And they were looking around for people. And this woman, Barbara Jones, Dr. Jones, was saying about this. And I was saying, God, that sounds fascinating. And you could do this and you could do that. And doesn't that get into it? This is theoretical, isn't it? How are you going to get this metastable material to form anywhere outside of the high pressure press? Anyway, they invited me for an interview. A couple of interviews later, she was a very highly strung scientist, and we had a bit of a heated debate, nearly an argument actually, and I had to leave the interview early because she had a fit. And
what kind of fit?
An epileptic fit brought on by the stress of arguing about this passionately about this potential for a technology in the future. She's a brilliant woman, actually. Brilliant. But obviously not capable of dealing with the stress of running this sort of very, very big industry highly secret potential project where everything rested on whether it worked or not. Anyway, I got invited back by some of the other people and was invited to join, and that was it. It was, and I sort of felt, everything felt right. It's like all the levers in a 10-lever mortise lock were aligning, and I was the key.
And you were just confident that you could figure it out. You never had concerns of like, what if I can't and I fail?
I never considered that failure was an option, that it wouldn't be possible. Everything sort of fitted. I'd imagined it all. I'd imagined how it was going to work. It was a point of actually getting the stepping stones towards making my imagination reality. There were some definite downsides. There were some real serendipities as well. I came in one Monday morning to switch off my piece of kit that had been running for 10 days straight. And been running a fairly standard process. And I took it out expecting to see this big wodge lump, 3-carat lump of single crystal diamond. And it was pink. And I thought, wow, the rarest stone in the world. What did I do differently? And it was a real misnomer to me, absolutely serendipitous. Of course, that sent shockwaves. Shockwaves. You can make a pink stone in a laboratory in 7 or 8 days when we can spend 10 years at a mine and never find a pink stone. And the last pink stone of this size that was sold was worth about 2 million quid. And this was a fairly titchy thing that I had made. Anyway, some of the greatest bits of that part of my career, when people say, well, what's the thing you're most pleased by yourself by, what's the greatest thing you've ever done? And a lot of people say, oh, my kids and what they've turned into. And Mine was meeting Harry Oppenheimer and Gray Fletcher, the founding fathers of De Beers and Anglo-American, which was also cross-held with De Beers at the time, and having a private viewing of all the stuff that I'd done. No one else was allowed in there. All the senior directors, all of them. It was just me, Harry and Gray. And we were going round, and Harry saw the pink stone. He was very impressed. He really knew his stuff about diamonds. He said, "This is just magnificent." They're very, very impressed. And then at the end of this short tour, which we spent weeks, months actually preparing all the storyboarding and the technical description, and everything very simplified and colourful and picturesque with loads of these diamonds that I've made. He comes up and he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "John, I've seen the future and I don't like it." And he'd seen what he thought was the potential demise of the gem industry. And so that technology, under his auspices and my strategic approach, was kept quiet until 2002 when I left. And then they patented it. My name's on 4 or 5 of them, or wasn't. They're all expired now, of patents for different things. I did all sorts of stuff. I did one that I'm particularly pleased by, which again, first in the world, no one else has ever done. I don't doubt if they'll ever do it, actually. I put the letter J in blue diamond inside a white diamond. I grew it in. And the base of that was that it was for one of these executive directors' showcases. And they were showcasing my stuff, and I was presenting, and the chairman at the time was Julian Ogilvie-Thompson. My boss was called James Campbell. He was a very gruff Northern Irish guy. And my name's John, of course. So J seemed the perfect sort of letter to put in there. So Julian Ogilvie-Thompson came out. I was totally bemused. Why would anybody want a diamond with a J in the middle? I said, "Well, your name's..." I had no respect for authority, still don't really. So I just say, "Oh, Julian," and everyone else would go, "Oh God, he just called the chairman Julian. Who do you think he is?" Sort of thing. I got a stern talking to always, but
because what should you call him, Mister? Whatever.
Sir, God, whatever. It was just the over familiarity shouldn't really be seen to be sort of answering back too pally on that. Anyway, he said, well, what? He said, well, your name's Julian. Perhaps you'd like a type in with these in. He went, Then James Campbell, really annoyed that I just called his boss Julian, said, well, Collins, no one's going to want something like that. I said, well, James, wouldn't you like a diamond type? And he just looked at me as if he was going to kill me on the spot. And I said, and if you two guys don't want it, my name's John. I'll have it. Thank you very much. And it made a real impression.
And what happened to the diamond?
The diamond? Someone's got it with the name J, I'm sure. A lot of the stuff that I did is all locked up in a safe somewhere. We did develop 2 pieces of equipment to detect this diamond that are used nowadays, Diamond Sure and Diamond View, to detect all forms of lab-grown diamond, whether they're high pressure or the stuff that I did. That was part of the poacher gamekeeper role that I played.
Okay. We've got to wrap up, even though...
Oh, we have to have a part 2. I'm only halfway through. Not even halfway through.
Okay, but last 3 questions are...
Right.
Is there one book that's had a big impact on your life?
Oh, blimey. That's a...
The first one that comes to mind, maybe.
Oh, believe it or not, Cybernetics by... well, there's some of the cybernetic stuff by Buckminster Fuller early on.
What does that mean?
Automation, human automation control, and those sorts of things.
And why?
There's one by Stafford Beer called The Brain of the Machine, which is probably an extension of that, better defined. It was totally new thinking, years old. It was a real vision of the future. It's like some of Claude Shannon's work early on as well. I mean, to have one book that's influenced, I mean, that's a bit sad, really. And you see all around it. I've got thousands of books. Every book influences me some way or another. Sylvia Plath, The Bell Jar, massively influenced me. Very helpful.
In what way?
Well, it was devastating when I got kicked out of university. Absolutely devastating. I felt so embarrassed. Actually, it led to a serious depression a couple of years later, or a year or so later. So I had to struggle through redoing my year. And I did really well. I was really exceptional. So I knew I had it in me, but that haunted me for years. I still have nightmares and I still don't know whether I did or not. So elated by having completed a PhD, I have these nightmares that I took on a maths one about an area of maths that I really wanted to do, and that I didn't actually embark on it or finish it. And somewhere there's this bureau with thousands of letters to me saying, pay the money back and do this. I still have nightmares about that. But that all harks back to the devastation of being kicked out of university. But then the strength of character that I see in myself now of doing something about it. Sticking with it.
On that topic, kind of, do you practice mindfulness or meditation or anything to keep you grounded or to work with those negative feelings, or even just a busy mind?
Busy mind problem, I go into nature. So I walk. It's like I don't so much go for the talking cure, but I do think there is a walking cure. So I walk every day, 5, 6, 10 miles, whatever. Ideally in nature, often up to Hampstead Heath, just up the road, a couple of miles away. It's a nice walk up there. Then get onto the heath, get lost in the forest, go into the bits where you shouldn't go, get purposefully lost. That's great. Listening to audiobooks is really useful. That it, to some extent, brings me points of focus to stop the brain whirring. Sleep's hardest. No problem getting to sleep, but you wake up after 3 hours. Getting back to sleep with an active mind is really difficult. So I've learned actually to get up, do something, and just use the time more constructively than imagining the worst. 99.99% of which never can occur.
You have those negative rumination thoughts
all the time. Hey, look, you have everything going around, don't you, in your brain? Everything. I wouldn't consider myself whole if I didn't. There'd be something weird if I only thought good stuff. The thing is, we're all imagining all the time. It's what we're imagining that's at fault. And when you're imagining bad things 90% of the time and good stuff or not much of consequence for the other 10%, you're in a pretty serious way. So I'm a great believer in actually finding routes to imagining better and imagining in the long term. And by long term, I mean 50, 100, 150, 200, 250 years better. And what we can do now so that at some point, 2 generations forwards, those people can look back at me as an ancestor and say, wow, great-granddad John, you were fucking awesome back in 2023 when you did and whatever it was. And trying to think of things that are going to have such a long-term impact, a bit like being born to doing the diamond thing.
So they the kind of things you worry about, like big existential things?
Yeah, and mostly big existential things, mostly really big things.
Like what's going to happen to humanity and kind of thing.
Well, a little bit more refined than that is, what are we going to do about the poisoning of the water table by all that discarded electronics in landfill, right? We create wonderful electronics for LEDs. And when they're broken, we throw them into landfill. Now, those LEDs are composed of materials like gallium aluminium arsenide and gallium nitride. Now, gallium is really poisonous, but we do nothing to see how much poisoning of the earth we're doing about this. I sit on the programme expert groups for the National Measurement System, which is the UK's approach to how we determine how we measure stuff, everything, all the way from Earth observation satellite measurements of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, all the way down to how we can measure the second, 10 to the minus 17 of a second, and how useful that is to us in terms of global positioning, goodness knows what else. And I'm trying to get them to recognise that we have to start this now, measuring it. It's like microplastics. Microplastics have been around for a long, long time. We're only just recognising that we can detect them, measure them, and we're seeing them because we're focusing on what we're finding in fish tissue and human tissue. So those sorts of, they're very big problems, but very highly specific, but real.
Yeah, so instead of worrying about it at 2 a.m. in the morning, it's more productive to say, okay, what can I do today to help work
who
on
can I
these
talk
things?
to? Who's going to do this? One person shouldn't be expected to do everything, can't do everything, but every person can do something. So it's then about convening and finding the people who can actually say, John's got a point there.
This is the other, sorry, I just thought of, because you failed second year uni and now you teach at Cambridge, which is another thing you do. And there was another guest on this podcast, Neil Gandrew, who failed second year uni and went on to study at Cambridge and be invited back to teach where he studied. So it's kind of, you can come to peace with...
Well, what I teach is at Cambridge Judge Business School, and I teach intellectual property for entrepreneurs. And I feel particularly proud of doing that because the courses that you usually get are a bit boring and a bit dry, and I make mine...
That's where I studied. Which isn't how we know each other, so that's just a weird connection.
Well, the best people go and do master's stuff at Cambridge. Cambridge is a really interesting place, and Cambridge Judge is very interesting as a business school. It does some interesting stuff, and this is part of the Masters in Studies in Entrepreneurship program. It's very popular around the world, quite detailed. But I like to think, and what my feedback is that I bring intellectual property to life, which is really boring and dull for most people who think it's just about patents, but we do an awful lot. And I'm really, excited by that. I also work a lot in ethics and responsible innovation for Digital Catapult around tech, in particular, blockchain, distributed ledger technology, AI, machine learning, and mentor lots of companies, startups in particular, in ethical approaches and the use of ethics and embedding ethics into everything that they do, actually, and every person that works for them. It's all interlinked. Ethics is a big driver in these things.
Okay, last question. What 3 words describe the best version of you?
Curious, honest, excited.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Anytime.